We're going to get started. It is 7 o'clock. Welcome. I am Bill Brown, the Director of Innovative Evangelism. I'm located within the Baltimore-Washington Conference, but I also work with those of you in the Peninsula Delaware Conference, and it's a joy to have you join us for tonight's Training Tuesday. Our topic tonight is Reimagining Outreach and Stewardship, and tonight we are joined by the Reverend Chelsea Spyres, who is the Executive Director of Riverfront Ministries, which is located in Wilmington, Delaware. I have that correct, in the Peninsula Delaware Conference. And we're also joined by the Reverend Cindy Kent, who is our Property with a Purpose Coordinator. She serves in the Baltimore-Washington Conference, but also resources those of you in the Peninsula Delaware Conference as well. So it's a joy to have them join us tonight. We'll get started with a word of prayer, and then we'll do some technical information, and then we'll get started. So if you would pray with me, please. Holy and gracious God, we do give you thanks for gathering us together tonight. And even though we may be sitting in a room by ourselves, we are still connected through this technology. But more importantly, oh God, we are connected by your Spirit. And so we pray for that Spirit to be upon our presenters tonight and upon each of us as we dive into how to use our assets of property as good stewards and how to reach out into our communities with the transforming love and grace that you offer. So be with us tonight, oh God. Give us insight, wisdom, and understanding in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. So wonderful. It's so nice to see so many of you from around the Episcopal area. As you are joining us tonight, there will be options for you to ask questions. Please use the Q&A feature when you have a question. It's easier for your host to keep track of your questions, and we'll get to them throughout the evening. Also, as you can tell, we are recording tonight's episode. And so tonight's episode and last week's episode will be on a variety of websites, from the Peninsula Delaware Conference to the Baltimore-Washington Conference to the website for the entire Episcopal area. And we'll drop that link in the chat for you. We'll also have a copy of the slide deck that is being shown tonight so that you all will be able to take advantage and take a look at that. So welcome, Cindy. Welcome, Chelsea. I'm going to turn off my camera and turn it all over to the two of you.
Thanks, Bill. Good to be with y'all tonight. And Cindy is going to start us off. So these slides are also going to be available to you all after the presentation. And so don't feel like you have to take too many notes. It'll be available as well.
Good evening, everyone. So excited to be with you. So excited to be co-hosting with Chelsea Spyres. And I see in the chat, there are friends in the chat. So glad that you all decided that this was a good use of your time on this Training Tuesday evening. Again, I'm Lucinda Kent, Property with Purpose Coordinator, as well as serving the local church. Many of you know me as Cindy Kent. And so tonight we'll spend some time talking about reimagining outreach and stewardship. It's kind of a little bit of a fancy title, but ultimately it's about how you are living out being the church today in your community and neighborhood. And what does that look like? Our churches post-COVID have less membership attending on Sundays, less regular giving, and people have shifted how they worship and how they qualify as worship and what they translate as worship. The other side of that is our churches are not as young as they used to be. And so how do we maximize what we have to be the church in real time in our communities, in our neighborhoods? And what does that look like? Next slide. Reimagining in our time and place. As a community, as a worshiping community, do you have a vision of beloved community? Do you know who your neighbors are and what is needed so that if you were not in your neighborhood, would you be missed? Stewardship. God only requires that we use what we have, and that's it. And not everyone has what their neighbor sister church may have. You may have more financial resources. You may have vacant land. You may have a parsonage that is not being used. You may have a fellowship hall that you can share with a community partner. And that also takes us into facility uses. Our churches have gotten used to using our space in the way that we use it. And not that our sanctuary isn't sacred. However, how can we rethink how we use our sanctuary space, our fellowship hall, our parsonage, our vacant land? And there are so many different ways to consider how to make use of the resources that you have. And please know, every church has a resource that can be useful to the community. Next slide. These are various components to help a church figure out how to be outward facing as the church. As a pastor of a local church, I know that my worshiping community wants to know how we can fill all the seats. And so I invite them to rethink what we do Monday through Saturday that would make people interested in whatever we might be unpacking on a Sunday. And what is our relevancy Monday through Saturday? Our little balloons in our slides say congregation readiness. Congregations have to be led to be ready, to rethink who they are as an outward-facing church in their neighborhood and community. And sometimes we get used to just doing what we've always done and being who we always have been. And honestly, sometimes the greater work is for the pastor to help the congregation to keep an open mind and to really rethink who they are as the today church, and more importantly, who they are as the tomorrow church. Who are we and who are our neighbors? A lot of our churches were started because they were neighborhood churches and people just walked to church often. And that's not so much the case today. And many of us don't even know who our neighbors are anymore. We still have a few members that drive from wherever they live and still come and worship on Sundays. It's important to just see who's outside and also what is it that's needed, because every neighborhood and community needs something different. God-fueled imagination. It is sacred work. God is leading every community and every congregation to a particular calling. And so a community needs to be prayerful and needs to really do the work of discerning where God is calling you into the today and the tomorrow church. Ministry clarity. You have to know where you're going. You cannot be everything to everybody. It's not possible, nor is God calling you to be everything to everyone. Is food scarcity the issue in your community? Is affordable housing the issue in your community? Are there lack of senior services or companionship? Do you live in an area that is primarily young families or not? And so all of these different groups have different needs. And you might not know who is in your particular zip code. We do have resources, we being the Baltimore-Washington Conference, where we have mission insight reports that have done the work of letting you know who is in your neighborhood. What is the average age group? What is the average education? Are they young families? Are they singles? Are they young professionals? Are they a retired community? To help you just get to know who's there and to start doing the drilling down of, given who's there, what might be the need and what resources do we have to fill it? They're all big questions, but you don't have to sort them out by yourself. Much of what I do as Property with Purpose coordinator is I do on-site visits with the local churches. I sometimes am contacted by the district superintendents because they have churches that they feel just need someone to go and take a look and just converse with them about their concerns. What are the resources that are available? How do they get connected? Most pastors are not developers. Most pastors, as you will hear from Chelsea Spyres later, are not experienced food truck people and all of the things that God calls us to. However, if we do our part, God will send the friends we need to help us to continue to not only walk into the lane of calling as a worshiping community, but to expand and to be vibrant and vital as a church, not just on Sunday, but on Monday through Saturday. Next slide. MAP stands for Missional Action Planning. And there are different layers and levels. As you can see with the CMAP, that CMAP group develops and equips conference-wide strategy and supports districts as needed for missional action. DMAP works under and with CMAP, and they identify, prioritize, and resource potential projects. They assess and improve local church vitality. And then we have the local churches, or the IMAPs, which develop and implement a comprehensive plan to take your next faithful step. And so we kind of go from global to local in how we approach missional action planning. And much of what I do as Property with Purpose coordinator facilitates and assists the work of CMAP, DMAP, and the local church. Next slide. Some of what you want to think about is discovering MAP, discovering the missional action plan that God might be calling your worshiping community to. Because God is calling every single worshiping community to something. And there is a community partner out there for you to work with so that you connect in an authentic and vibrant and intentional way with a community partner. No two churches are alike, and each journey to vitality is unique. Wherever you might be on this path, I am here to help guide you, and we are here to help guide you. I don't work alone, but I'm usually the person who might show up on the scene. You want to begin to unlock your path to vitality. You want to start your journey to energize your congregation now. I also sit on the board of trustees for the conference. And part of how Property with Purpose became a thing, it's only a year old, it's a fairly new thing, is once your church ends up on the agenda of the trustee board, a lot of things have happened. Your church has decided it no longer is vital, it no longer is vibrant, and it no longer can continue as a worshiping community. And I remember often saying there must be some stops along the way, that maybe if we had caught some of these churches before they ended up on this agenda, we could have resourced them to redirect them, because I haven't met the church that wanted to close. I don't think that church exists. But I think sometimes churches feel isolated and that they don't know what to do. They think they have no resources and they have no help. And so help is on the way. And because I do serve a very modest worshiping community, what we did was we had a huge parsonage that no one was ever going to live in again. And so we refreshed it. We renamed it the UMC House, the Under My Care House. And we house families, women with young children, because that was a community that my worshiping community resonated with. It was a need in our neighborhood. And because we have some great schools and we have some great neighbors, but it's gotten very expensive to live in not only Northwest Washington, D.C., but that happens to be where my local church is. And so we are able to provide housing for women with children who otherwise might not be in a neighborhood with great schools. They care for the social services. We don't provide those. However, we fully care for the house so that is not a responsibility that they have to be concerned with. And we found financial resources and grants that undergird and support that because there is a need in our community. And that's just one example. That is just one example. There's a church that I did a site visit with, and they have a couple of campuses that are vacant. They have 3 campuses. They're worshiping at one. The other 2 are vacant buildings, and one of them is near Morgan State University. And so we're trying to connect with Morgan State and to see if we could expand student housing. Now, housing isn't the only possibility. There's another church I visited the middle of last week. They have a vibrant feed ministry. They're feeding over 600 people every single week. The volunteers represent 5 different churches, not all Methodist churches, and then just some volunteers from the community who just feel a calling for that type of work. And so they're doing amazing work. And they are a very modest community. However, they have a fellowship hall, they have a kitchen, they partnered with several of the supermarket chains in the area that donate food, so that they just had to have a willingness to open their church up and to rethink how they align themselves with the neighborhood. And they're trying to expand. There are people coming with pickup trucks who are now delivering food to people who are unable to leave their homes to take advantage of it. And so it's all of these possibilities, and the possibilities are endless. I think the other part that I want to mention is, as Methodists, we do have to touch base with our district superintendents. We do have to connect with church locations and buildings. There are requirements of how we participate in the process from a Methodist perspective. The information is in our book of discipline. However, it's helpful to have someone kind of give you a cheat sheet, if you will, of what the conference requires for you to be able to engage in moving into using your resources in a different way. You can book an appointment for an assessment and discover how MAP can lead your congregation to new heights. I am glad to do Zoom meetings if that's what works. I do site visits when the community says that that's something that resonates with them. And so in my last slide for my presentation with you this evening, there is a QR code, which will give you an opportunity to schedule a 30-minute assessment. There's also a link once we make this PowerPoint available for the MAP intake form. That is a super helpful intake form. It will ask for some very basic information, and then it will route your intake form to the appropriate landing pad in the conference to take you to the next level of where you believe your church is being called to in your community. And I will close with this. I find that the two big questions are, where do we find the money to do all of these great things? And while my church is willing, my church building is struggling with HVAC or electrical or accessibility or some of the physical things with some of our older churches. There are grants available. Not only do I meet with churches, I meet with other organizations that are providing grant information. I've been attending some HUD gatherings to see what municipal and federal monies might be available. And I also do the homework to find out who's in your neighborhood and what are they offering to undergird and support. And so I think that concludes my participation for our Training Tuesday. And Bill, I'm not sure if there are any questions, but before we hand off to Chelsea.
We will. Can we let's drop the screen share for a second, if you don't mind, Chelsea. And we have two questions. One, I know that I think I can answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Let's see. Let's do that. Oh. Never mind. So somebody asked, how does the conference districts determine which churches are identified as not being a vital church? Does the church self-identify this, or does the conference district evaluate this through other means? That is an excellent question. And so I know that, Cindy, you focus on the physical assets, the physical property, the physical location, and how churches can better use, leverage, reimagine. In my area, I work very closely with the vitality piece. And so, Leonard, I would say two things you can do. We really like it when churches self-identify where they are in terms of their own vitality. And we have a couple of ways that you can do that. One, definitely follow the QR code that Cindy has up on the screen now. That will take you to a Calendly meeting scheduler, so you can schedule a conversation with Christy Latona, who heads the MAP initiative for the Episcopal area. But you can also reach out to me. We have a number of processes in place to help a church get a clear understanding of your current reality in terms of vitality. One of them is called the Readiness Initiative. We're accepting participants for that right now, and I will drop in the chat as soon as I hand this back over to Chelsea and Cindy. I'll drop in the chat a link where you can sign up to be a part of the Readiness Initiative. And through that, I work with your congregation to do a survey, to do some mission insight work, to look at some other material that you all provide. And we, myself and Lauren Harris, will give you some detailed next steps that you can do to improve your vitality wherever you might find yourself on that spectrum. So please reach out to me, Leonard, and I'll shoot you my email so that you can do that. Now, another question that has come in, and I'm going to ask it directly. I've asked the question, the person who posed the question, for a little more detail, but this is their question straight up for you, Cindy. Why can't we use closed churches? Many have other rooms for Sunday school. So I'm not quite sure exactly what they're asking, but I know you had mentioned something about closed churches. So as we wait for the person maybe to expand on their question, if a church closes, what are some things that do happen to those properties?
Well, honestly, in this season, the trustee board is also finding some different ways forward, and we as far as from the trustee board perspective, have tried to be creative in what we do. There was a church in Baltimore where that community had declined significantly, but they felt that there was enough of them to continue to worship in their modest chapel. But then they had this whole rest of church. And so the trustees aligned with a community partner to find creative ways to make use of the rest of this church's building so that they could continue to worship in their chapel, and we could continue to use that property in a way that would not only be the larger church in the neighborhood, but also would provide much needed resources that required physical space. So I mean, it really could be anything. Everything is as unique as a fingerprint. And that's why assessment is really important. And I don't know how this is getting ready to sound, but size does not matter. You don't have to be a big church to have big impact. And you just really need to know that. And most of our churches are in same and similar conditions today, if all the truth is being told, because I'm visiting these churches in Pendle as well as Baltimore-Washington Conference. And so God has something for everyone to do. You just have to give us, as Bill has offered, us as the larger resource in the conference to connect with you so we can help you find your way forward.
Thank you, Cindy. And I think where you were going is a lot of people look at church vitality and church health by the number of people who show up. And really, church health is not about your worship attendance entirely. It is about the impact you're having on your local community. I know we're going to get into that. I don't want to steal any thunder, so I will just leave it at that. But in terms of our question asker did expand that many communities can meet up in these closed churches. Absolutely. We'll just use first names. Absolutely, Kathy, that there are so many different ways that a church building could be used. And our hope with tonight's presentation is that you begin to think of these new ways now. There are ways that your congregation can use your property differently now and not wait till a congregation ceased to exist as a worshiping community. Those are all the questions we have at this point. So I'm going to turn it back to you all, and let you continue.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy, for setting us up so well. So again, my name is Chelsea Spyres. I am pastor and executive director of Riverfront Ministries. And I really appreciated, Cindy and I didn't even talk about this piece, but in Cindy's part, she kept saying worshiping communities, right? And I think that is really important because you might be on this call and you might be a part of a new church start, or you might be a part of an extension ministry, or you might be part of a fresh expression. And this is also for you, right? So Riverfront Ministries is an extension ministry within the Peninsula Delaware Conference. We initially started as a new worshiping community of the Presbyterian tradition. And so our roots are with the Presbyterian PCUSA, and we were launched to be a faith community on the riverfront in Wilmington. During a time when development was starting on the riverfront and there wasn't a church presence, the Presbytery recognized that this was an opportunity to plant a new community. In Methodist world, we would maybe call that a new church start or a fresh expression. But we were launched as a new worshiping community of the Presbytery. And that was about 10 years ago, which is crazy to me that it was that long ago. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our beginnings. But really at the beginning and throughout almost a decade of Riverfront Church, the words that have been central to our community are these: song, word, and table, creative, collaborative, and sacramental. And so part of what Cindy shared, right, was assessing yourselves as a community and what is central to who God has called you as a community to be. And for us, these 6 words, and they've taken on many different forms, but these 6 words are grounding words for us when we are making decisions. When we are trying to decide between one program or another, or when we have multiple community partners coming to us with possibilities, we come back to these 6 words and say, does this fit in? And we are working on a longer mission statement and a longer purpose statement and all of that. But these 6 words have really been a grounding force in how we gather and in how we make decisions. So again, and you're going to see these on the next slide too, but song, word, and table, creative, collaborative, and sacramental. And when Riverfront started, we were really launched just as a worshiping community, as a place for Sunday night worship. Riverfront was launched as a place that would meet outside and in different community spaces that already existed, and was really launched as a community for folks who are not a part of a traditional church. Maybe they have experienced church traumas. Maybe they have been kicked out of faith communities for expressing too many questions. Maybe they've never really been a part of a church, but are looking for something in their faith life, but they're not really ready and they're not really wanting to walk into a traditional space. And so Riverfront was started as this outdoor community from Easter until October, and then as one that would meet in different restaurants and art galleries and bars in the wintertime. And really for the first 5 years or so, the main parts of Riverfront were around worship on Sunday nights and think and drink book and Bible study that met on Wednesdays. And while Riverfront started as an initiative of the Presbytery, very early on, so you'll see in 2015, Grace United Methodist and Trinity Episcopal Church joined the Riverfront planning team. And Grace United Methodist especially has been an instrumental partner, and I think there are some Grace folks on this call, and so thank you to Grace Methodist. It's been essential to Riverfront's being. There have been seasons of our worshiping life where we have met inside of Grace in their art gallery and in their cafe space. And together, Riverfront and Grace really became partners for dreaming. Some of that was helped by the fact that a few of us were part-time Grace staff while we were part-time Riverfront. And so sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. But this collaboration between Riverfront and Grace United Methodist early on helped set the stage for some of what we're living into now. And so in 2019, our story really begins to change when Wilmington Alliance, a community partner in Wilmington, approaches Grace United Methodist about building a shared commercial kitchen. So you'll notice this is Wilmington Alliance with this idea. They had done a feasibility study in 2017 and 2018 about a shared commercial kitchen space. And you might be asking, what is a shared commercial kitchen? And we're going to get there. But essentially, it is a kitchen that is certified by the health department so that food businesses can operate in that space. And the key that it's shared means that multiple businesses call that one kitchen home. And it becomes this communal shared kitchen. And so Wilmington Alliance had the idea. Initially, they were going to build this commercial kitchen in a warehouse. They were looking at a multi-million-dollar project when a couple of their key funders backed out. But they had this dream, and so they started dreaming about where did kitchens exist within the community. And as y'all probably all know, Most churches have a kitchen, and many of those kitchens are in good shape. And so Wilmington Alliance started to ask some of the local churches about using their space. And you may or may not be surprised to hear that the first almost a dozen said no. They said, not in my church. It's too complicated. We can't share. How are we going to run it? There were too many questions. But when they approached Grace United Methodist in late 2019, early 2020, about the same time that I joined the scene as well, Grace said, we really like this idea, but we're not sure that we can operate it. At the time, Grace United Methodist was getting ready to welcome a middle school girls' school into their building, and they had a lot going on. And so the trustees really said, we appreciate this project, but we don't think we can do it on our own. And this was around the same time that Riverfront, at that point, Riverfront Church, this group of the presbytery, was looking for ways to have a deeper impact on the city. We don't own any physical property ourselves, but especially with this tenet of the table, right? Remember our 6 words. This piece about the table, this piece about being creative and collaborative and sacramental. We started to dream about how could Riverfront be the operating partner of this shared kitchen. And so you'll see in early 2020, the 3 officially form a partnership with an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, and very clear guidelines about who was responsible for what. So Riverfront becomes the operating partner. Wilmington Alliance is one of the financial and project partners. They came to the table with about $50,000 raised from grant writing on their own, and we needed to raise about an additional $100,000 to get the kitchen to where it needed to be to operate. And so Grace United Methodist is that physical space partner. So the 3 form an official partnership, and we begin really exploring this shared kitchen model. And grant writing begins. 2020, the year of COVID, the year that I wrote a lot of grants. And I will tell you that the grants that we received were not large grants. They were grants that came in $25,000 increments. They were from here, there, and everywhere. It was like, if I could convince somebody to give us $10,000, that application was worth it for me. And I also will name that at this point, I am new to grant writing. I am not trained in this. I had some experience at a nonprofit I worked for right outside of college, where I was helping give the measures that the executive director needed to include, but I had never written a grant before. But I started talking to people that do write grants professionally and started hearing some do's and don'ts. And 2020 really became our year of grant writing. 2021, construction began, and we really spent that year working on program development. And it was in 2021, all of these years after Riverfront start, that we established as our own 501c3. This allowed us to go after some additional grants. This also allowed us to no longer need a fiscal sponsor or a fiscal agent. It allowed us to really condense our finances and to kind of grow up, right? So we're no longer sponsored by the Presbytery and by the United Methodist. We're now our own faith-based nonprofit. As a part of this faith-based nonprofit, we are continuing to meet for gatherings for worship. And in April of 21, we resume gathering weekly, which this part will be especially important in our part 2 timeline. But in April of 21, right, we're coming, folks are starting to be vaccinated. We are meeting outside. And so gathering in person outside, physically distanced, all of that becomes safe again. And in January of 2022, the Wilmington Kitchen Collective, which is the name of the program, officially launches. We open at Grace United Methodist, and we hire our first operations manager. And so here we go. So this is the mission statement of the Kitchen Collective. And again, remember this at this point, but still now, 3 years later, we are shared. It's a partnership of Riverfront Ministries and Wilmington Alliance. So we continue to make most of our big decisions together between these two organizations and in concert with our traditional church partners, which we'll get to. So this is the mission statement of the Kitchen Collective. It was really important to us early on that we were going to be more than just a kitchen space, right? The kitchen space is important because without the physical kitchen, our entrepreneurs cannot run their business. But we kept hearing in our initial conversations how important the business development piece was, how important some economic support, so some grant funding that would help in the initial licensing process, how important these pieces would be. And so for us, the Kitchen Collective becomes a project of Riverfront Ministries and a way to bring in additional income because our entrepreneurs are paying a monthly membership fee and an hourly fee sometimes to use the kitchen space. And so this becomes an additional funding stream for us. And we, Riverfront Ministries, are paying rent to Grace Methodist to use their space. And so Grace Methodist is also receiving additional income from having the kitchen. So it becomes a new way of stewardship of the kitchen. And so this is a bit of like how our process works. We, from the very beginning, were shocked, but we had a lot of people inquiring about the kitchen. And so we have a waiting list, a form for folks to fill out who are interested in joining the space. And then we do one-on-one interviews and some get-to-know-yous and offer membership to one of those entrepreneurs. They sign a license for use of the space, and they also complete a long licensing process with the State Board of Health, with the city, with the state, business license, their ServSafe, their insurance. If they're selling products, like packaging them to a business, they get licensed with the FDA. Really trying to make sure that our businesses are operating above board and that our kitchen is helping folks launch their business, but they're also doing it legally, right? So that we're not just selling product with folks who aren't licensed. So that licensing process is a huge piece. Then they go through a health department inspection. And the Kitchen Collective, again, is providing them with the use of space. But we also have a lot of equipment and small wares. Everything in our kitchen spaces are communal use. And then if people have like specialized knives or pots and pans that they want to use that are just theirs, they store those in a storage unit for themselves. We're also, again, helping them through all of that licensing process. And in exchange, they are paying us a monthly membership fee. But now they can sell and they can prepare and then sell their product legally. And so let me see if this is on this next slide. Okay, so again, we are more than a certified kitchen. These are a few of the benefits that folks receive when they are a part of the Kitchen Collective. And you'll notice on this list that there is a lot in addition to the kitchen space. There's support with the Small Business Development Center. You'll also notice that line does not say business support through Chelsea. because Chelsea does not know how to run a food truck. I know a lot more than I used to, but I don't know. I'm not a food truck expert. And our team, like, we are a small nonprofit. I can't hire someone that is a full business expert to coach folks. And it would be a repetition of resources because the Small Business Development Center and Launcher DE, another local group, are already doing this. And so from the beginning, we've really tried to say what resources already exist out in the community and how can we be a hub for those resources? And then how can we supplement in the gaps? So our workshops try and supplement in the gaps with like, and by bringing in culinary and business professionals to teach on a very specific topic that we're not seeing taught out in the field, but our entrepreneurs are saying, hey, I need help. And probably more important than anything else on this list is that last piece, that our entrepreneurs are a part of, our entrepreneurs are a part of a community with others on this journey. Our folks over and over again talk about how lonely and how isolating the entrepreneurial world is. And the Kitchen Collective brings this spirit, or at least we're trying to, of collaboration instead of competition. And now, 2.5 years later, we have our entrepreneurs like cooking with each other's ingredients and referring jobs to one another when they can't do it. And they're also supporting one another in big life milestones, right? So just like a church would show up for a member when a family member dies, our entrepreneurs share that with one another. They will put it in the group text or send it in an email, and they will let us know, like, hey, I just lost a member of my family, and the community is supporting them through that. They're making each other meals. They're calling each other and checking in. They're offering to babysit one another's kids in a way, right? Think about all of the supports that you have as a church community. The Kitchen Collective community is doing that as well. I have made hospital visits on behalf of the Kitchen Collective. We coordinated a repass for a member who had died. I do more pastoral care with our Kitchen Collective community some days than I do with the rest of our riverfront community. And the beauty is that over and over again, our entrepreneurs talk about how some days it feels like their church has forgotten about them because they're not able to be there on Sunday mornings because they have a catering gig or they are vending in a community space. And they have talked about how isolating that is and how special it feels that a pastor and that a church community cares about them again. And many of them have grown up in churches and have watched church space sit empty. Many of them begged other churches to let them use their space. And right, if you don't have the support and the infrastructure, many places will say no. And yet we are building this community of yes and of welcome and of hospitality in a way that is the church every day. And so I want to just share a little more about our story. I never expected to be the pastor of one kitchen. Again, I am not trained in culinary. I am not trained in restaurant management. I did not imagine that I would be running shared commercial kitchens. But really what changed kind of our trajectory and encouraged us to keep dreaming was this invitation in September of 2022. Really was an invitation in September of 21. So we hadn't opened our first space yet when one of our Presbyterian church partners came to us and said, our kitchen is already certified by the state of Delaware. Why are you not operating here? And I said, I didn't know your kitchen was certified. And I didn't know what I know now about the certification process when we started this whole conversation. But the fact that First and Central Presbyterian already was certified by the state of Delaware, which we've now found out many church kitchens are already certified by their state agencies, it meant that the barriers to open were far fewer. We had to purchase some additional equipment, but that invitation from First and Central allowed us to look at our waiting list, which at that point was about 50 businesses long, and say, could we operate a second space? It's really helpful that the second space is a half a mile from the first space. And it was Presbyterian. And so we're living into our ecumenical nature as a nonprofit. And we were able to open at First and Central. About a year later, we were able to hire another staff person to help us in managing the facility and events, which that hire in October of 23 was with the understanding that we were going to operate 4 kitchen spaces. And so you'll see in October, and then, in December of 23, and then just this past month, we have now opened kitchens 3 and 4. And you can see some of our numbers to the right? That through the Kitchen Collective, and we still have a few spaces open. So at full capacity, these numbers will be a little higher. But currently, there are 29 businesses that are working with us in the Kitchen Collective, run by a total of 34 entrepreneurs, because some of those businesses have 2 owners, right? But through the Wilmington Kitchen Collective, 48 people are employed, which amazes me every day. It amazes me. Again, from the beginning of were we really going to do this to where we are now, and this like creative use of space and of partnership, which takes me to this piece that a lot of times people ask, like, is what you're doing ministry? And I hope you on this call know that it is, right? That it is a sharing of the resources that have been entrusted to us as the church, that we're trying to celebrate the gifts that exist within our entrepreneurs, that it's meeting this real need. And I think about how Jesus often like met the needs of the people first and then said, come follow me, right? That he like showed up where they were. And so now we're showing up in food truck lots and at community events, and that we're continuing to invest in our neighbors who, again, have typically not found belonging in church. And this is really just summarizing, I think, the key parts for us that have led to the success we have. Right? That it is centered on our entrepreneurs, that it's centered on this piece of willing to try things for a season and to pivot. There have been so many workshops that we thought were going to be great. And we had like a whole season planned out of like workshops on food costs, for example. And it turns out that food costs really need to be like evaluated on a one-on-one basis, that a large group format talking about food costs doesn't work. And we learned that in 2 sessions, and we canceled the rest of the series and put some more one-on-one time into food costs. But this piece of like willing to try things for a season and then to pivot over and over again, right? We could not be doing this work without our community partners. There are just so many parts of this ministry that we are not experts on. And so we save ourselves resources, and we are building on the resources of the community when we are doing things together. And some of that includes, right, I talked about Wilmington Alliance, who was had the initial idea. They continue to be one of our financial partners. And there are times when Wilmington Alliance goes after a grant and they apply for the grant because they are better situated with the business community and the banking industry than we are. And there's times where I write a denominational grant or a faith-based grant, and Wilmington Alliance is nowhere on that application because it doesn't make sense for them to be on the application. And then there are times we write grants together. And I would say more often than not, we're writing them together. But having partners around the table who are committed to the funding aspect has allowed us to go after pockets of funding that one of us on our own might not be eligible for. But in that, it's been really important to have this clear delineation of roles and responsibilities. So as the operating partner, there are certain things, certain decisions that I have to go to Wilmington Alliance on because we're in this together. And then there's other parts that I can just make the decision because I am the operating partner and I have that power. And figuring out who is going to take the lead on different conversations, on different marketing pieces, that clear delineation of roles and responsibilities. Partnerships are hard and messy, and some days, honestly, it feels easier to go it alone than it does to go it with other people. But going it with others, I think, has allowed us to go further. It's maybe been slower, but it's allowed us to go further and has allowed us to, again, just have access to resources that if we went it alone, we would not have access to. And having that clear delineation, having an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with each project partner, then allows us to go back to that when people are acting outside of their role, right? Or when people haven't done their homework. It's like, well, you were supposed to do X. Like, what is missing here? And sometimes that person is me, and I ran out of time. And so saying, like, humbly, I need your grace. Let's revisit this. And then a really fun part that, again, I wouldn't have dreamed that I'd be doing is this ability to teach and to encourage. There's not a week that goes by that somebody doesn't reach out to me and say, tell us about the Kitchen Collective and tell us about how you're operating this. And so we have developed a consulting process that I am happy to consult with other spaces. And so it's just brought a lot of joy to be able to share about this experience and to share the really nitty-gritty of the Kitchen Collective, which has, like, one of my dreams is that across the country, that there would not be a food truck or a caterer or a baker that has to wait very long to test out if their business is viable because churches are opening up their doors left and right for food trucks and for culinary entrepreneurs, right? That, like, the church could meet this need for culinary entrepreneurs across the country with the amount of space that we have. And so I just really love sharing about our model and knowing that not every community is going to be able to support with the amount of business supports that we are, but that this model might inspire. And finally, just that it's a spirit of collaboration always, and not competition. That when pretty early on, when folks started asking us about our model, I had someone ask me, like, aren't you afraid of going out of business? Aren't you afraid that, like, somebody else is too many other people are going to do this and you're not going to have a waiting list? And I'm like, no, again, that's my dream. My dream is that I have 0 people on the waiting list because we've met the need in the community. And so I'll just leave this up as we go to, if you guys have any questions. This is where to find us on Facebook and
Actually, we'll put that back up. It's sometimes easier with the questions that people can see you. I know.
Now you can see
everybody
me.
loves that. So a couple of questions that have come in for for both of you. One is, so I've decided that, hey, my church has a kitchen. We want to be a kitchen collective. What do I do next?
Yeah. Next, you should reach out and contact me. But so a tricky part of this answer is that the regulatory requirements in every city and every county are very different. And so while I know the requirements in Wilmington very well and could tell you the minimum of your kitchen, every county and city is slightly different. But you can find those requirements on your county health department website, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. And so that's really step one, is figuring out what is required for your kitchen space. As part of our consulting, we also do an initial assessment with folks, because it's not just about the space, but it's about what funding do you already have to put towards this, and what people resources. So not every congregation is going to hire a staff person to manage their kitchen space, but what capacity do you already have on your staff? And what capacity do you have maybe of volunteers to take on specific roles and responsibilities within the project? And so we'll do an initial assessment with folks if you're interested.
Well, thank you, Chelsea. And for those who are looking how to reach, we'll put the slide back up in a minute, but I've also put in the chat the website for the Wilmington Kinship Collective. You can look there. I've also put the website for Riverfront Ministries in the chat. You can find Chelsea there. I've put in the website information on MAP and how you can find Cindy. So all of that's in the chat. And I see Chelsea just dropped her own email in the chat, so take a look at that. Cynthia asks, what are the requirements to use the church property as a food truck site? She can clarify this if she wants, but I'm thinking she's just talking about, hey, we want to invite food trucks onto our property so that they can offer food for sale in our community. Are there any specific requirements that you're aware of? And she's saying, yep, that's her question. So she wants to offer food trucks. What should she do?
Yeah. Our experience is that you can offer food trucks as a pop-up thing for the community without needing much anything else other than saying, hey, food truck, you can park here for these hours. Sometimes where we have found, at least in Wilmington, the city regulations start to change is if the food truck is a permanent entity on your site or is parking there overnight, but that a one-off or a multiple times as long as it's a pop-up, and I put it a pop-up can be regular, but as long as it's a pop-up, that you can offer that. And then it's up to you to decide whether you want to make sure that food truck is licensed properly. And if so, you should ask for their city and state health department permit, which they're supposed to keep on the truck.
I would interrupt and say you would absolutely want to make sure they're licensed, just because any liability, you want to make sure it does not fall back on the church. I would also, because I've got experience working with different congregations in the Baltimore-Washington conference, the one thing you want to make sure if you're doing a food truck night is advertise, because this is the owner-operator's livelihood. And they could be in a lot of places because they're on a truck. And so they're deciding to be with you because they're hoping sales will make it worth their while. So anything you can do to get the word out and get people to show up will also help build that relationship, and they'll want to come back. And there is this amazing underground food truck communication network, and they tell one another where to go. They also tell one another where to stay away from. You want to be on one list, you don't want to be on the other one. So please do that. Cindy, a question I think is coming for you. Is there a way to rent out the parsonage for affordable housing if the pastor decides that they're not going to live in the parsonage?
Yes. Yes. However, there may be some variables depending where you are, and what certain requirements may or may not exist. So there's a little more to the conversation, but the short answer is yes. Yes, you can.
And they could probably reach out to you. I see you've also put your email in the chat, and you could have a further conversation with them about that as well.
Absolutely. There are parsonages that I have worked with, and I mean, some of my startup has been with the Greater Washington District of the Affordable Housing Committee. And so I hands-on worked with a really great committee where that was the main effort, to work with the empty parsonages and to create affordable housing, which did two things. It created affordable housing in the neighborhood. It opened up a parsonage that was closed and had no one living in it. And it also created an alternative income stream into the life of the church. And so there are multiple blessings that come from doing that. But the short answer is absolutely yes, you can do that.
Well, I will put the plug into Michelle, who asked the question. Feel free to reach out to Cindy. I'm going to, as you all, we do have some time if you have more questions, but I'm going to put in additional, more shameless plugs. You mentioned a couple of times, Chelsea, about fresh expressions, and I just want to put out there for both annual conferences, this is open to anyone in the Baltimore-Washington, Peninsula, Delaware, Episcopal area. Our Fresh Expressions Academy is going to be starting on November 2nd. I've put a link to registration in the chat, I think. Maybe not. It's not seeming to want to do that. Course, not today. Well, we'll work on that. But the Fresh Expressions Academy is with Michael Beck, who is probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the United States around fresh expressions. He's working with us. It is a 12-month cohort. We'll start on November 2nd with a retreat. We'll have a year of asynchronous online training. We're going to take the group to the Fresh Expressions United Methodist National Gathering in Atlanta. And for those who wish to participate, there is no cost to you or your local church except for the books and resources that you may need. And you can get creative with how you can get those resources. If I don't figure out how to get the link in the chat, don't worry, you can email me and we will send you information. But this will be our second year, and we're looking to see some exciting Fresh Expressions start across both annual conferences. We've had participants in both annual conferences. Anything the two of you would like to use as your closing words? Because you are so thorough that we're not getting any questions.
I have a couple of closing words. Perfect. I just want to say that God is still creating. God is still creating, whether it's a fresh expression or a reimagining of who you are as the outward-facing church in your community and neighborhood. And to know that you do not have to sort any of this out by yourself. Chelsea has graciously offered to do some consulting with you, and you saw the story. It wasn't a quick, fast, and easy story. So she knows what the legwork is. And, help us help you, because we feel called to what we're doing, and we not only want you to be a vibrant today church, we want you to be a tomorrow church as well, whatever the expression of that might be.
Excellent. Chelsea, we're going to give you the last word.
I just echo a lot of that. I think also a piece that Cindy said earlier that's been resonating for me is that, right, you don't have to do it all. And so there are so many options for how to be in your community and in good relationship and meeting needs. And I think sometimes we get overwhelmed at all of the options, and we get overwhelmed by I have to do it all. And I think a piece for us that we've really been trying to say is what is our one thing, and how are we doing that one thing well? And that one thing for us has been the Kitchen Collective. And it is opening up a lot of other possibilities, right? And we are like continuing to dream about what does hosting community meals with our entrepreneurs look like, and what does, right, there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to food. But for us, we like started with this shared kitchen model, and now we're dreaming about other things. And so I think just that piece of to focus on the like next right thing for you as a congregation, and to do that well. And again, you're not in this alone. And even just to remember, right, that there's a lot of us out there that are who are creating and who are trying and who are pivoting. And I think sometimes, at least for me, it's just helpful to remember that and to like have a conversation with a colleague. Like Cindy and I, in planning this, we're just like, oh, it's good to talk to another like creative, weird church soul, like our roles are odd. But it's so worth it for all of the crazy that I now know about grease traps and HVAC systems and things I didn't think I needed to know about. Like, it's worth it every time I talk to an entrepreneur. And so just praying for y'all.
Nothing they ever taught us in seminary.
Yeah. Praying for y'all as you discern your next right one thing.
Thank you so much to the both of you. We are really trying to help resource our local churches to live into this vision of 100% of our congregations becoming 100% vital. And the two of you have been instrumental in helping us just rethink how we approach our property and how we approach our ministries and how we approach partnerships in order to share the love and grace of God. So I really appreciate you both taking the time to prepare for tonight and to be here tonight. Join us next Tuesday, October 22nd, as we dive into something completely different. We're going to be joined by Paul Eichelberger, who is the Chief Financial Officer for both annual conferences, and he's going to be leading a session on church finances during times of renewal and recovery. So if you're interested about finances and funding and budgeting and how to make all of this work, you want to join us. As my microphone gets thrown away, join us. I've put in the chat the link to register for both annual conferences so that you can join us next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Until then, again, thank you both for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of tonight's Training Tuesday, and I will see you all next week. Bye now.